Hello everyone and welcome to my Java tutorial series. In this particular episode, I'm going to be going over error handling using the try-catch method. Now, error handling in Java is fairly simple. It's not as complicated as you might think, but it's very important because you want to make sure that not only is your program bug-free, that it also, whenever users enter incorrect data or perhaps something misfires in your program, that it's able to fix itself. For instance, in Microsoft Word or Adobe Premiere or Photoshop or something like that, where you're entering numerical values, maybe for font size, maybe for like a color number RGB, a timestamp or something like that. If you enter words, it won't accept words. Like it won't. It wouldn't crash the program if you entered Apple into the font size for like Photoshop or Microsoft Word or something like that, right? However, if they didn't have error handling, you could enter Apple, you could hit enter, and then it would just crash the program because those weren't numbers, those were fruit. It's fruit. So you want to make sure that your program is able to handle that. And like I said, it's very simple to do in Java. So here's sort of an example of what I was referring to with numbers and stuff. If I run this real quick and I type in 100, it works. You enter the number 100. Good job. You can follow directions. Now, if I were to go in here and do like I said, and I enter not Quapple, Apple, it crashes because Apple is not a number. And you can see I'm just essentially taking and parsing that int that I'm getting. I'm assuming that it's an int, and I'm just parsing it, but that's bad because if I enter anything except an int, it crashes. So we need to handle that somehow, because even if I were to enter a decimal, 1.0, it still crashes. I mean, it's a number. Technically, it's a non-decimal number, right? Technically, it's a non-decimal number, but it still crashes. So we need to make sure it doesn't do that. Now I'm going to copy and paste something in here, and I will explain what it is. Don't worry. Let me just now delete this and paste. Okay. So this is essentially a try-catch. This part right here. The while loop is in there, and I'll explain why. But what you want to do your try-catch is you write try, then a bracket, the code that you want to try to do, another bracket, and then catch. Now, if I run this, you'll see what happens. Enter a non-decimal number. I type in 1. You did not enter the right character or characters, whatever. I could change that. Enter a non-decimal number. I could do 1 again. I could do 2. I could do 1.0. I could do anything. If I type in 8, you enter number 8. Good job. So that's essentially how that works. It's handling that error that I was getting and attempting to redo it, which is why the do while loop is there, to just keep repeating that over and over again until I do it correctly. So essentially how this works, right? You get to the try section, and it's going to essentially attempt to do whatever's inside of that. Now there's only two things. There's number equals integer.parseInt input, which is the one that's going to cause a problem. Now, bool equals true is not going to cause a problem. We know that. But if it did cause a problem, it would go immediately to the catch. Either one of those lines, if it creates an error, will immediately go to the part that says catch. Now, you can have more than one catch if you want. All you have to do is simply go and just add another one. You just literally go catch, and then whatever the name of the exception you want to use is. So in my case, I could literally just type number format exception E, and that would work. Now it's going to give me an error because technically I already have that covered with this one, and I'll explain why in a second. But all you could do is just keep adding them like that, and you can have multiple exceptions handled. So if you get more than one exception from your error, you could get multiple kinds. You could get number format exception. Maybe you're handling files, so you could also get file not found exception or something else like that. So you would maybe want to handle those differently. So you could have multiple catch clauses that do different things. but whenever it does hit an error, it immediately stops running. So if I had, I don't know, if I did this again, whoops. If I had two of those, this one would hit an error first, assuming there was an error. These two would not run at all. They would be skipped. It would immediately go to the catch clause that matches the error that this one gets. Now, exception E, it's not number format exception, which was the error I was getting. Which, if you can check that, because whenever your program gets an error, it tells you down here. If I run this again real quick, just so you can see. Oh wait, I don't have. There, okay. So it says number format exception right there. So you can see what your errors are. Now, I think there's a list somewhere online. I don't know exactly where it is off the top of my head. But you could find online, if you just search for a list of, Java exceptions, it'll probably tell you. There's actually a hierarchy to them. So because of that hierarchy, I can actually just do exception. And that covers literally every exception that there is. Because it's just general, if there is an exception, period, it'll handle it. If I did illegal argument exception, that would also handle number format exception, because that's what it is. It's an illegal argument. File not found exception would also be handled under that. There's a lot of them that would be handled under illegal argument exception. And so there is a bit of a hierarchy to the exception list, and you can type a larger hierarchy one to gather a whole group of them under one roof and just do it that way. Or you could just specifically type them in one by one. But you cannot do like a general one and then also do a specific one. So if I can't do I can't do that, even though, I mean, if I were to comment out all of this, it would let me. But because there's already this here, this wouldn't work. Now, I believe, hang on. Whoops. Okay, I believe if I were to put the other one first, it might work. Yes. So it's going to catch number format exception first, and then exception second. So if it's a number, it always starts at the top and goes down, right? So if it's a number format exception, it'll go there. If it's anything else, it goes to exception. But it won't work the other way. It'll just go to exception first, and then number format exception is not used. So that should make sense. Now, the reason there's an E, before I continue, the reason there is an E is it's essentially acting as a variable. You're creating an instantiation of the class exception or number format exception. So you could use another thing instead of E if you wanted to use exception or error or class or something like that. You could use some other variable. You're not really going to use that variable very much. It's just there because it has to be due to the way that the error handling works. E is just used because that's sort of a standard notation for things like this. It's used in error handling. It's used in a couple other circumstances as well. You'll see E pop up. It's sort of like I is used in for loops. It's just kind of a standard notation. But if you do this, you can do E dot, and there's a bunch of methods you can use. You can actually get the message, so it'll give you the exact error message that was thrown if you want. So you could just do, catch exception and then E dot get message, and it'll give you the exact error message that you get. So you can do that if you wish to get the error message. I forgot to go off Steam. There. Alright, now what you can also do is throw these together. So say you have a couple different exceptions. This obviously wouldn't be an issue if you want to use like a hierarchy system, but if you want to use like very specific exceptions, you could actually just throw them together and use the pipe thing like that, and just throw them together that way. So you don't have to create multiple catch methods, and you can just stick them together. Where's the thing? I just want to make sure that is correct. I don't know. I can't remember if it's 2 pipes or 1. Hang on. Yeah. Okay. So yeah, it's just the 1 pipe. So I just wanted to remember. So what you would do is you wouldn't have the E here. It'd be like number format exception, and then let's do like file not found, and then you would have E. Right? Is that how it's supposed to be? Is that not working? I don't understand why that's not working. It should. But oh, okay. It's just saying that this would never be thrown. It's looking at the code I have written, and it's saying it would never be thrown. That's why it's giving me an error. It says unreachable. This exception is never thrown. So, but that's essentially how that works, right? I was trying to figure out why it was giving me an error because it should have worked. But you can just put a single pipe, which is the symbol. If you hold Shift and you hit the symbol above the Enter key, it's that little line, and so you can just string them together like that. You would add the E or whatever other thing you want at the end of that. So it'd be like 1, 2, 3, 4, and then E. And what would happen is it would go to this, or this one, or this one, or this one, and it would just all execute the same code. So you wouldn't have to copy and paste stuff. You can all just put it in one thing, right? So there's a lot of different ways to go about concise, making all this concise and stuff. But you can also have free reign to handle each individual exception differently by having multiple catch statements, or handle them all in one by just using exception, or do whatever you want, however you feel like writing your code. So let me get rid of this. Now, let me get rid of this too. Let's see. So that being said, that's pretty much the way that these work. Now, the way I've got this do while loop set up is that, assuming, like, I know I have to do it at least one time, which is why I do while. So I start with this, and if this succeeds, I don't get an error, and it goes to here, and it just goes to false, and then the next one is the while, and it just exits out of the while and goes on, because I know that that's not going to give me an error. There's no way. So as long as I don't get any errors, the very last piece of code gets me out of the while loop. But if I do get an error, I set it to true, just to make sure I set it to true, because it does start off false, right? So I set it to true, and we just keep doing the loop until it goes back to false. So that's kind of how that works. Now, there's also another clause you can add, which is finally. Finally will execute regardless of whether there was an error thrown or not. So if I do finally, then you just stick code in here. And that does have to be next. It can't be like stuck outside of a while loop or something. That has to be last. It's optional. It doesn't have to be there, but it has to be last. And what happens is, regardless of whether the try succeeded or whether it failed or what error you get, it doesn't matter what error you get, finally will occur. So it's kind of like some sort of like last ditch code or something, you could do to say, here's an error message that occurred, here's what the error message is, if you wanted to, but it's kind of there so that regardless of what happens, this code will execute anyway. So that's a thing you can use if you need to. I'm trying to make sure that everything is covered. I think that's pretty much all there is to exception handling. It's kind of hard to get started with it because you don't know all of the errors that you can get, but somewhere online I know that there's like a list of them. The best way really is to just test your program. Like if there's some sort of input in your program, just type in different characters, see what pops up. So you be the user and you do what you would do as a user, and have other people test it as well, and you can figure out what errors you're getting and then fix those. And because really I don't even know all the errors off the top of my head. I would have to just test to see or look up online what the errors are. But and there's also just, you can just use exception if you want to as a general rule of thumb, but that's pretty much all there is to do with try catch. It's fairly simple, fairly easy to figure out and use, but you just have to make sure that you stick all of the code that would be causing errors inside that try. And sometimes you can use multiple tries. You can use tries inside of tries too. I did need to mention that. You don't have to just use one try at a time. If I wanted to, I could stick like 3 or 4 tries inside of this and have nested tries. But I would have to make sure that the one that is the innermost try has catches after that, and then there would be like a series of catches, all nested inside of each other. So you have to make sure that you do that correctly. Sort of like you nest if statements and else statements. They're all nested inside of each other, and that's how that works. So feel free to do that and just kind of experiment with using try catch. But that's pretty much all there is to it. Hopefully everything has made sense. If there was something that was not clarified or that needs clarification, let me know. I'm happy to either answer questions and comments or even remake the video with updates if need be. So thank you, and I'll see you guys in another video. Thanks for watching.